They say silence speaks louder than words, but no one ever tells you what it actually says. You go quiet, and suddenly the whole dynamic shifts. They notice, they question, they wonder why you stopped showing up the way you used to. And what they don't realize is, you didn't go silent to play a game. You went silent to remember your power, to stop giving energy to people who didn't know how to hold it. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't fighting to be heard. It's choosing to walk away without a sound. Let's begin. Part 1. They always come back when your silence is real. It starts the same way every time. You go quiet, not because you're playing a game, not because you're trying to manipulate anyone, but because you've had enough. Enough of chasing, explaining, justifying, enough of overextending yourself for someone who made your presence feel optional. At first, they don't notice. They think it's temporary. They assume you're just having a mood or waiting for them to reach out. But the truth is, this time, something's different. You're not pausing, you're not hoping, you're done. And that kind of silence, that's the one they feel in their bones. Because when your silence is real, when it's not rooted in punishment but in self-respect, it carries a gravity that can't be ignored. You're no longer feeding the dynamic. You're no longer texting first. You're no longer keeping the door open just in case they change their mind. And when that happens, everything begins to shift. At first, they might feel relief. The pressure's off. No more conversations they don't want to have, no more expectations they don't want to meet. They scroll past your name, maybe even with a little smirk, thinking they've won. But time has a way of unraveling illusions. Days pass. The silence holds, and suddenly something starts to feel off. Because they were counting on your pattern, they were counting on your weakness, they were counting on your inability to let go. But this time, you're not checking their stories. You're not reacting to their breadcrumbs. You've stopped orbiting around their energy, and they can feel that absence more than they ever felt your presence. That's the moment it hits them. The silence wasn't temporary. It wasn't reactive. It was real. And when silence is real, it forces them to hear everything they tried to avoid, all the parts of themselves they projected onto you, all the disrespect they dismissed, all the moments they hoped you wouldn't notice. Your silence brings it all back, amplified by absence. They'll start to wonder why you're not reaching out, why you're not fighting for them, why your name feels heavier now that it's not showing up on their screen. And that confusion, that unease, it's not about you. It's about the reflection they now have to face, alone. You didn't leave with a storm, you didn't slam the door. You just stopped showing up for what wasn't showing up for you. And that's what makes them come back. Not because you begged, not because you convinced them, but because silence, when rooted in power, becomes undeniable. It doesn't matter how confident they seemed, how cold they acted, how indifferent they tried to appear. The truth is, when your silence is real, when it's calm, clean, and final, it echoes longer than any goodbye ever could. And when it does, that's when they start to come back. But by then, something else has shifted. You're no longer the same man who waited for their return. Part 2. They're addicted to your energy, not your presence. Most people think they miss you, that they long for your presence, that they ache for your company, your face, your voice. But the truth? It runs deeper and darker. What they really miss is your energy. Because what they were drawn to wasn't just you sitting next to them. It was the way you made them feel. It was the way your attention validated them, the way your presence stabilized their chaos, the way your kindness, your softness, your endless availability gave them a sense of control without them ever having to earn it. You became a source, not a partner, not a person, a source of reassurance, of emotional supply, of spiritual comfort. You weren't just showing up, you were pouring out, over and over again. And they drank from that without thinking about what it cost you. Until one day, the source ran dry. You stepped back, not out of revenge, not to prove a point, but because something inside you finally whispered, enough. And when you went quiet, when you stopped offering your energy like it was free, they didn't miss your face. They missed the feeling of being constantly fed. That's why they come back, not for connection, but for consumption. They want access to what you used to give without question, the comfort of your good morning texts, the soft landing of your forgiveness, the ego boost of knowing someone still cared, even when they didn't. It was never about seeing you. It was about seeing themselves reflected through your love. But here's what Stoicism teaches us. Real strength is knowing the difference between being valued and being used. And once you see that difference clearly, you can never go back. Not because you hate them, but because you finally respect yourself. So when they return, don't be fooled by nostalgia. Don't mistake their craving for your energy as a sign of real change. Look closely. Ask yourself, are they here for me or for the comfort I once made too easy to access? Because there's a painful truth hiding inside the attention they suddenly give. They don't miss you. They missed who they got to be when you loved them without boundaries. And that kind of love, that kind of self-sacrifice disguised as devotion, it ends now. Art 3. Your silence shatters their illusion of control. Control doesn't always look like dominance. It doesn't always come with raised voices or obvious manipulation. Sometimes control is quiet, subtle, wrapped in smiles and half-truths. It looks like distance you're not allowed to question, emotions they don't explain, affection they withdraw to keep you guessing. And without even realizing it, you begin to bend. You try harder, you show up more, you tolerate longer, not because they ever asked you directly, but because they trained you to chase their approval. But then something changes. You stop. You no longer explain. You no longer initiate. You go silent, not out of spite, but out of clarity. And suddenly the dynamic collapses. Because the control they thought they had, it only ever existed as long as you were reacting. You see, their power wasn't real. It was borrowed from your willingness to give it away, from your fear of losing them, from your habit of seeking peace over truth. But when you remove your voice from that equation, when you stop dancing around their mood swings and cold spells, their illusion shatters. They can't read you anymore. They can't predict your next move. They can't guilt you into explaining what isn't theirs to question. And that silence, it's not just quiet, it's disarming. Because now they have to sit in uncertainty. Now they have to feel what it's like to not be in control. And for someone who's used to pulling strings behind the scenes, that stillness is terrifying. This is what Stoicism gives you. Not emotional numbness, but emotional sovereignty. You no longer seek chaos to feel alive. You no longer need their attention to feel valid. You've become the storm they can't forecast and the mirror they can't escape. That's why your silence stings more than your words ever did. Because it doesn't just end the conversation, it ends their illusion. It reminds them that the grip they thought they had on you was nothing but your own fear of walking away. And now that fear is gone. You're no longer reacting. You're no longer explaining. You're just gone. And that kind of disappearance, that kind of stillness, it doesn't need closure. It is the closure. Part 4. They thought you'd always be there until you weren't. They didn't say it out loud, but they believed it. Somewhere deep inside, they assumed you'd always be there. Always replying, always waiting. It was understanding. No matter how inconsistent they were, no matter how little effort they gave, you'd stay because you always did. You made excuses for their silence. You forgave them for the mixed signals. You told yourself, maybe they're just busy or they're not ready yet. And so you stayed, even when you were confused, even when you were hurt, even when your needs were swallowed in the name of being low maintenance. They saw your loyalty, but they mistook it for weakness. They didn't know that quiet endurance doesn't mean you're blind. It means you were giving them space to grow, to meet you halfway, to rise to the level of love you offered so freely. But they never did, because they thought your patience was permanent. They thought your love was unconditional and your presence a guarantee. Until one day, without a breakdown, without a goodbye, without a warning, you simply stopped showing up. You didn't make a scene. You didn't demand closure. You didn't punish them with angry words. You just disappeared. And at first, they were fine. Maybe even relieved. They told themselves, he'll be back, he always comes back. But days passed, then weeks, and slowly they began to realize this time you weren't coming back. Because something shifted. Not in them, in you. You finally stopped believing that your love alone could fix what they never tried to build with you. You stopped thinking that being there, no matter how poorly you were treated, was noble. You stopped allowing your loyalty to become self-neglect. That silence, it wasn't revenge. It was the sound of you choosing yourself. Finally, and now, they feel the weight of what was lost, not in loud moments, but in the absence of all the little things they thought were ordinary. Your attention, your consistency, your quiet understanding. They realize now it wasn't ordinary. It was rare, sacred, and it's gone. Stoicism doesn't teach us to abandon people. It teaches us not to abandon ourselves. And when someone takes your presence for granted, your silence becomes your greatest teacher. For them and for you. Because now they know what it feels like to lose someone who never wanted to be above them, only beside them. And that realization? It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in the dark, in silence, when they look around and you're no longer there. Part 5. They chase closure when you offer none. Closure. It's the word they never used when they had access to you. But now that you've gone quiet, suddenly it's all they want. Funny, isn't it? When you were available, explaining yourself, clarifying your intentions, over-communicating your feelings, they tuned you out. You poured truth into silence. You tried to fix misunderstandings before they turned into scars. You gave everything except your dignity, and they responded with indifference. But now that you've said nothing, now that you stopped justifying your worth, now that the final message never came, they call it unfinished. They want to talk, to understand, to get clarity. But they don't want truth. They want control. You see, closure is often a disguised attempt to reopen access. Not to reconnect with you, but to reframe the story. To rewrite the ending so it doesn't reflect their carelessness. So it doesn't reveal the imbalance, the silence, the disregard they once dished out so casually. But you've learned something Stoicism teaches at its core. You are not required to provide resolution for someone who dismissed your voice when it was freely offered. They ignore your honesty. Now they must sit with your absence. And that's what makes it hurt. Not the silence itself, but the fact that this time you gave them nothing to argue with. No last word. No outburst to demonize. No closure they can twist into a reason to feel better about letting you go. They can't explain you away. They can't villainize you. They can't box you into their narrative because you simply vanished. And that, my friend, is where your power lives. Not in your ability to get the last word, but in your discipline to offer none. Your silence becomes the space where they finally hear their own choices echoing back at them. And trust me, there is no louder confrontation than the one that comes without noise. You didn't ghost them. You grieved while they were still present. And when the weight became too much, you walked away, not to hurt them, but to save yourself. Now they chase a conversation they once avoided. They want closure. But you've already closed the door from the inside. Part 6. They watch, but they don't reach out. They won't message you. They won't call. They won't ask how you've been or admit they miss you. But they're there, watching your stories, reading your captions, scrolling through your feed at 1 a.m. with a silent ache they'll never admit out loud. They act like you don't exist in their present, but they never really left your orbit, because the truth is, it's easier for them to observe than to engage, to pretend they're fine than to face the reason you had to go silent in the first place. Why? Because reaching out would mean taking responsibility. It would mean saying, I felt your absence. I know I let something good slip through my fingers. And that kind of honesty, that level of vulnerability, it terrifies them more than your silence ever could. They think watching is safer, that if they keep tabs on you from a distance, they're still in control, still close enough to feel something without being close enough to be held accountable. But what they don't realize is that watching doesn't keep you. It doesn't undo the disrespect. It doesn't rebuild the bridge. It only exposes the one thing they've been trying to hide: regret. They regret the way they left. Or maybe they regret never showing up fully in the first place. But they can't say it. Not yet. Because pride still runs the show. And pride always chooses silence. Until it's too late. So they settle for breadcrumbs of your life. They scan your photos for signs of someone new. They analyze your tone, wondering if it's about them. They hover in the shadows of your digital presence, but never step forward. And here's where your power grows stronger. You don't post for them. You don't perform for their attention. You don't bait them back, because you've outgrown the need to be watched. You're now living for something deeper than validation. You're living for peace, for presence, for purpose. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they once forced you to survive. You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them a reply. You don't owe them the version of you they abandoned. You've moved forward. They're stuck watching what they no longer have access to. And that's not pettiness. That's what happens when someone values your presence. Only after it's gone. Part 7. You become the lesson they needed too late. There's a point in time, weeks, maybe months after you've gone, when it finally hits them. Not in the middle of a dramatic moment, not while scrolling through your photos, but quietly, randomly, while brushing their teeth, sitting in traffic, folding laundry. That whisper of regret, that pang in the gut, that slow, aching realization that they didn't lose someone average, they lost someone rare. And not because you made them chase, not because you punished them, but because you gave them something steady in a world full of chaos and they mistook it for background noise. They start to replay conversations, revisit memories, rewrite endings in their mind that never happened in real life. And as they do, something painful settles in. You didn't just walk away. You became the standard. The one they compare others to, the one who listened when they were cold, who stayed when they were distant, who gave them grace when they deserved silence. And now your silence is all they have left. They tell themselves it wasn't that serious, that maybe you were too sensitive, too intense, too much. But late at night, when the noise settles and pride wears off, they know. They didn't lose someone who needed them. They lost someone who chose them, freely, without games, without ego. And what hurts the most? You never made them earn it, but they never made you feel safe in giving it. You see, people don't regret losing someone who begged, who chased, who pleaded for attention. They regret losing the one who walked away quietly, who accepted reality without performance, who gave them a chance to rise and then left when they didn't. That's the paradox. You become the one they can't forget, not because you forced yourself into their memory, but because your absence taught them more than your presence ever could. You became the lesson, the one that humbles them, the one they talk about in therapy, the one they see in every person who isn't you. And the hardest part? By the time they realize it, you're already gone. Not angry, not bitter, just unreachable, because you've grown past needing closure. You've built a peace that doesn't require their apology. And while they're busy realizing the value of what they lost, you're already living as the version of yourself they never took the time to see. You didn't become the lesson to prove a point. You became the lesson because you finally stopped shrinking for people who refused to meet you where you stood. And now, they'll never forget you. Not because you stayed, but because you didn't. Part 8. They'll try to come back when you're no longer there. They always come back, but not when you're hoping they will. Not when you're still checking your phone or wondering if the silence means something. No, they come back when you've stopped needing them, when the wound has closed, when your peace is louder than their chaos ever was. That's when it happens. The message, the apology, the sudden, "Hey, how have you been?" that feels like it came from a different universe, but by then, it's too late. Not because you hate them, not because you want revenge, but because you've healed in a way they'll never understand. You've rebuilt your identity without their presence in it. You've learned how to smile again without wondering if they'll notice. You've stopped needing their validation, like oxygen. At first, they'll act casual, like they're just checking in, like nothing ever really ended. But underneath that nonchalance is fear. They feel the shift, the energetic disconnection, the way your responses, if any, are no longer hungry, no longer tethered to the old version of you. And that's what unsettles them. Because when they left, they expected you to wait. Maybe not consciously, maybe they didn't say it, but deep down, they thought the door would stay open. They thought your heart would stay soft, that your memory would keep them warm. But now you're colder, not in cruelty, but in clarity. You've stopped bleeding love into places that couldn't hold it. You've stopped giving your time like it was worthless, and most of all, you stopped waiting. Because something sacred happened in your silence. You met yourself. You rediscovered the version of you that didn't need to be chosen to feel valuable. So when they come back, it doesn't feel like a movie ending, it feels like a stranger knocking on a door that no longer exists. The house has been rebuilt, the lights are off, the soul that once longed for them has moved somewhere quieter, stronger, deeper. And though they may not say it, they feel it. They feel the wall where there used to be warmth. They feel the stillness where there used to be hope. They feel the consequences of underestimating the quiet ones, the loving ones, the ones who gave everything and then gave nothing. And no matter how many times they try to tap back in, no matter how sincere their words might seem, something inside you knows. Letting them back in would cost you too much peace to be worth the nostalgia. Because they didn't return for you. They returned for the version of you that no longer lives here. And you've grown past the need to be revisited by ghosts. Part 9. Why you don't chase when they return. It's tempting, isn't it? The moment they come back, the ping of a message you stopped waiting for, the familiar name lighting up your screen. For a second, maybe less, you feel that flicker, the one that says, maybe this is it, maybe they've changed, maybe they finally see your worth, maybe now it'll be different. But that's not what really happened. What happened is this: you became silent. You stopped feeding the cycle. You stopped being predictable. You stopped being theirs, without them having to earn it. And when the energy shifted, they felt it. Not right away, not the next day, but over time, slowly, uneasily. And they came back, not out of growth, but out of absence. Not because they suddenly knew how to love you, but because they missed the way your love made them feel. But you don't chase, not this time, because now you know. What's coming back isn't clarity, it's memory. It's familiarity. It's someone trying to step back into a story they once neglected to write with you, but you've outgrown that chapter. You don't chase, Because you finally understand that love isn't proven through how hard you try. It's revealed in how clearly they show up. And if someone only comes back after you go silent, they didn't miss you, they missed the control. They missed the version of you who'd light up at a single message, the one who made excuses, who dropped boundaries, who mistook breadcrumbs for a full meal. But that version? Gone. Replaced by someone who knows his worth without needing it mirrored back through someone else's regret. You don't chase, because chasing would cost you the peace you fought so hard to find. It would invite confusion into a space you finally made clear. It would give them the comfort of your presence without the discomfort of accountability. Stoicism teaches this. The truly grounded man doesn't run from love, but he doesn't beg for it either. He meets it where it's mutual, where it's steady, where it's earned, and when it isn't, he stays still. Not out of pride, but out of principle, because your value isn't negotiable just because someone remembered it late. You don't chase when they return, because what you're chasing isn't there anymore. It never was. And the man you've become, he no longer lives in places he had to beg to be seen. Part 10. The final lesson. Silence isn't emptiness, it's evolution. At first, silence feels like emptiness, like the echo left behind after a door closes, like sitting in a room where your voice used to matter. It's quiet, too quiet, and the mind begins to panic. We're taught to fear silence, to see it as a void, a failure, a punishment. But that's a lie. Silence isn't the absence of something. It's the arrival of clarity, of space, of breath. It's what happens when you finally stop pouring into places that never poured back. When you stop auditioning for someone else's attention. When you decide consciously, fully, unapologetically that your peace matters more than their confusion. You see, silence doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've grown past the need to be heard by those who never listened. It means you've broken the addiction to explaining your worth. It means you've stopped trading pieces of yourself for moments of validation. That's not emptiness, that's evolution. Because real power doesn't come from noise, it comes from stillness, from restraint, from watching your own mind crave a reaction and choosing not to give in, from holding the line when it would be easier to collapse, from walking away not because you're bitter, but because you finally believe you deserve better. And maybe they'll never understand. Maybe they'll never admit they were wrong. Maybe your silence will forever be misinterpreted. That's okay. You're not here to be decoded. You're here to be whole. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away without defending yourself. Stoicism teaches that peace is found not in having less chaos, but in needing less from it. And when your silence is rooted in truth, it becomes more than just a response. It becomes a revolution. It becomes the space where you meet yourself again, where you hear your own voice, clearly, firmly, finally. So no, your silence wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. The moment you stopped reacting and started becoming. If you've made it here, through every chapter, through every silence, through every shift, then you already know. This wasn't just about them. This wasn't just about who left or who came back. This was about you. About the moment you stopped searching for answers in someone else's behavior and started listening to your own silence instead. You didn't just listen to this podcast. You sat with yourself. You confronted the urge to chase. You held back when you wanted to explain. You honored your value when it would have been easier to trade it for a brief moment of connection. And that's the kind of courage the world rarely celebrates, but I see it because silence is not weakness. It's not passive. It's not empty. Silence is the sound of healing, the sound of boundaries, the sound of reclaiming your voice without raising it. So thank you for being here, for staying, for choosing growth over comfort, for choosing dignity over chaos, for choosing stillness over noise. And if this journey has meant something to you, if even one sentence helped you sit up a little straighter or breathe a little deeper, Then carry it with you, not just in your memory, but in your movement, in the way you hold your space, in the way you no longer fold when someone else pulls away. Because you didn't just survive their silence, you transformed inside yours. This isn't the end. This is where you begin again. But this time grounded, this time whole, this time already enough.